Welcome back to Titletown Talk with your host, Jackson Tolliver. A lot of games to go over today. I have a very special interview with Mazz, Tony Massarotti from the Felger and Mazz 98.5 radio show. A Boston sports media legend. I would put him up in that category. So if you wanted to skip right to that interview, I will have that time code available in the description. But for now, let's go over some of the games that we had this weekend. Let's start off with the Celtics. Now, I believe I predicted on Thursday that it would be a 30-point Celtics win over the Hawks. It would be a bounce back. They would come in. They'd have fire. Drew Holiday was coming back. All the starters were playing. I thought it was going to be a clear victory. I was unfortunately wrong. They really embarrassed themselves in that one. I embarrassed myself as a fan for making that prediction. This one was tough. It was a 123-122 loss in overtime after a DeJounte Murray game winner. I thought Brown had won it for the Celtics, but then I looked at the clock. There was still 6 seconds left, so Brown hit a jump shot mid-range to put the Celtics ahead. I actually loved that Mazzulla called a timeout on this play and drew something up, and it wasn't just Jason Tatum taking the contested shot. Wow, if you give the ball to someone else instead of Jason Tatum, it causes some confusion on the other team, and, good things might happen. So I like that play call, but there was too much time left on the clock. DeJounte Murray was on fire. Ultimately, he hit that game winner. It was his career high, I believe it was 44. 44 points on 44 shots, so the field goal percentage wasn't great, but that was a great game from him. Got to give him credit where it's due. Hat off to DeJounte Murray. He was on another level, especially in the clutch. In overtime, he was great. He couldn't miss, and he's a big time player for sure. It makes you wonder about the future of the Hawks because I think the Hawks are better without Trae Young. Defensively, they're more dialed in. They're better defensively. I mean, Trae Young is one of the biggest defensive liabilities in the NBA, in my opinion. He can't guard anyone. He's small. He's not very strong. So it's interesting to see this team without Trae Young, and I think they'll explore that this offseason when they're ultimately bounced in the play-in tournament or in the first round. I don't anticipate them making the first round because they'd have to make it through either Miami or Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. So I don't think that's going to happen, but, we'll see. It's the NBA. It's a crazy league. Regardless, that'll be interesting for them to explore. But for the Celtics, I just feel like they weren't as dialed in as they should have been, but also I guess they shouldn't have been, right? Because these games don't really matter too much. These are all exhibition games. Joe said he's using these games as practice. In this one specifically, he said he was really practicing 1 through 5 switching, which is why they kept getting Porzingis on that screen. It was working for Murray, so then Murray would be matched up with Porzingis, and Porzingis can't really effectively guard a player like Murray, right? They're too fast. They're too shifty. He doesn't want to close out too much on that mid-range because if he does and they bait him, then they can just run right by him for the easy layup. So it's a really tough matchup for Porzingis, but Mazzulla said after the game that he was doing that on purpose. I was screaming at the TV when it was happening, like, why do you keep doing this? Have them, stop having them switch on screens, have them play through the screen, play under the screen with a stronger defender like Drew Holiday or Derek White or Jaylen Brown. But they were doing it, so whatever, I guess they were practicing it. I hope they never try to do that in the playoffs, right? If you're playing against somebody like the Sixers and you have Porzingis switching off on Tyrese Maxey, that's a nightmare. So don't do that, please. But regardless, I appreciate the fact that they are trying new things like they did in the first game against Atlanta where they had Tatum at the 1, right? This isn't something that they would probably ever actually do in the playoffs, but it is a good time to experiment with different things, try out different tactics, different strategies, because you really have nothing to lose. The Celtics don't have anything to lose. They have the 1 seed on lock. They will probably end up with the 1 seed in the entire NBA, unless they, really start losing some games here down the stretch, but they have a relatively easy schedule, barring three or four games, for to close out the season, and most of them are at home. They only have 2 away games left for this entire regular season. It's crazy. We're here. We are we are almost at the playoff time, so it's getting there. The bench was incredibly poor in this game. Hauser and Pritchard, they've gone cold. I know they're usually better at home, but I expect more from them for sure in terms of production. Tatum was fine for most of the game, except that last shot that was contested, but that's the play that Mazzulla drew up, I guess, and he defended that play. He said it was a good look. I don't know what he was looking at. It didn't look like a good look to me. It's a contested 3. I think he was double-teamed as well, so that doesn't seem like a good look. In my opinion, it wasn't even close to going in, so that was unfortunate. So, yeah, that was an embarrassing one. One that, both of these Hawks games, you got to just throw them away as fans. The players, I hope, will actually reflect on it and use it as a reminder that they're far from invincible. They are beatable, even with all their pieces intact. Now, mind you, they didn't have Al Horford in this game, who definitely would have helped on the offensive glass. The Celtics were just murdered in terms of rebounding. They couldn't get one. They were giving up offensive boards that, would lead to threes and kept the Hawks in it. They had so many second chance points. They really beat the Celtics in that metric. So Horford would have been helpful there. But regardless, you have your starting five. You have all these guys in. That's a game that you should win as the Celtics, but they didn't, so you got to move on. And luckily, last night's win gave us fans a chance to move on. Great win last night over the New Orleans Pelicans on the road, 104-92. This was a very, very good defensive performance from the Celtics, and it looked like it wasn't going to be. Zion was having his way in the first quarter with whoever was guarding him. He went 4 for 4 to start. Pelicans went on a pretty nice run into the first quarter. Celtics were down 9, and then after that, they just flipped a switch. And if this game isn't proof that the Celtics have an on-off switch, I don't know what is, because they were off for the first quarter. They've been off for these last 2 games, and for whatever reason, after that second quarter started, they just turned it on. They dialed in defensively. They had energy. They were getting people's airspace. They were bothering people's shots. Zion couldn't really get anything going after that first quarter because it was really aggressive defense from whoever it was. I mean, Porzingis was turning up. He got 5 swats by the end of the game. Great defensive showing from him. Holiday and Derek White started really getting in people's face. They brought on Tillman instead of Cornette, and he was able to have a really good defensive presence. So, there are still things to be concerned about, right? 104 points on offense, that's low for the Celtics. We've seen them drop 150. So, the offense still isn't quite where we want it to be heading into the postseason. Pritchard and Hauser were still not great this game. They've gone cold. Like I said when I was talking about the last game, I'm really excited for them to get back home and sort of get their groove back because those 2 players are really good at home typically. But it was just really high energy. For whatever reason, they turned it on. Al Horford was great. Everyone was really good defensively from the second quarter on, and you love it when you hold a team like New Orleans to sub 100 points because, yes, they didn't have Brandon Ingram, but Zion Williamson's such an explosive player offensively. He's been doing great this year. The first season in a while that I can remember where he's been healthy for the majority of the year, so love to see that. CJ McCollum, another great scorer. They really contained him. I mean, the Pelicans have really good offensive weapons. Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall. Valanciunas is a great offensive center, and they held him to 2 points. So they were really good in terms of defense. The offense still needs to be slightly improved, but this was definitely a promising sign. The Celtics still have yet to lose 3 games in a row, which obviously bodes very well for the playoffs. Because if you lose 3 games in a row in the playoffs, you're probably losing the series. So we haven't seen that in the regular season yet, knock on wood. I very much doubt we'll see that in the entire regular season based off the schedule that they have coming up. They do have, I believe, the Bucks and the Knicks back-to-back to almost close things out. So that could be one where they lose 2 in a row, but I think that's sandwiched in between like the Wizards and the Trailblazers, I think, maybe the Hornets. So they have weak teams in between those 2 to sort of surround those 2 games. So I doubt they'll have a 3-game losing streak heading into the postseason, which is a great sign because you don't want to rack up 3 losses in a series. So yeah, I think, this week as a whole, these 2 Hawks games, I think served as sort of reality checks for the Celtics. They're not as good as they think they are, right? They're good. They're the best team in the NBA, but once it comes playoff time, anyone can win, and the Celtics need to, learn from lessons of the past. Last year, the Bucks were the 1 seed, and look what happened there. And they might be playing the Miami Heat first round. It's looking increasingly likely that the Heat or the Sixers are going to be their first round opponent, which is, frankly, terrifying. And these are 2 teams that the Celtics have history with. They've had the Sixers number, luckily, so I think a lot of fans are hoping that they get the Sixers and that Embiid isn't at full strength as he is battling back from that meniscus surgery that he had a couple months ago. If it's the Heat round 1, buckle in, because it's going to be a tough road for the Celtics to get out of that first round. Even though they have swept the Heat this year, and I think the Heat aren't as strong as they were last year because they lost Max Strus, Gabe Vincent. Those were the guys that really torched the Celtics last year and went on generational playoff runs. And, now Gabe Vincent isn't even really... I think he's coming back tonight, maybe. He actually might be coming back tonight. But for the Lakers, not for the Heat. So that doesn't really affect the Celtics at all. But if it is the Heat in that round 1, buckle up. It's going to be a battle. They don't back down easily, as the Celtics know, unfortunately. Next up, tomorrow night, the Celtics are traveling to Charlotte to close out their road stretch. It's their second to last road game, as I mentioned. I cannot imagine a world where they lose. I hope that doesn't come back to bite me, but no matter who they play, even though the Hornets are, I think they're the only team sub 500, or were the Hawks sub 500 in these last two games? They were for a while the only team sub 500 that beat the Celtics, and that was just an anomaly of a game. It was in Charlotte, so we'll see what happens. No LaMelo. He's done for the season. No Mark Williams. So Miles Bridges, I guess, could be the guy that really sinks you. He was last time. He had a dagger three-pointer to beat the Celtics when they were in Charlotte, but that was early on in the season. What I'm saying is I can't imagine a scenario where they lose no matter who's playing. That should be an easy one. But Wednesday is a real challenge and, in my opinion, a really important game. The Thunder are coming to TD Garden, and the Thunder beat the Celtics earlier this year, back in January. So they have a chance to be only the second team to not lose to the Celtics this season. The Nuggets, obviously, since we only play those Western Conference teams twice in a year, it's easier to become 2-0 than 4-0, obviously, in sweep. So the Nuggets swept the Celtics this year, 2-0. The Thunder have a chance to also do it. The Thunder are potential finals opponents. I don't think it's this year for them because they're young, they're inexperienced in the playoffs, and I don't think they could get by Denver in a 7-game series. I don't think they could get by the Clippers in a 7-game series or Minnesota. Out of the top 4, they're my least likely, in my opinion, to make it. I could see them even being first-round exits to a more experienced veteran team, whether it's the Lakers or the Suns or the Mavericks, whoever it is. I could see the Thunder being first-round exits. That's not to say that the Thunder are a great team, because they are, but they're young. So I would anticipate, maybe next year, the year after, they become really top-tier contenders. I think it's going to be the Celtics and the Thunder for a long time. Those two teams are going to have some great finals matchups over the next half-decade or decade, which I am excited for, but I don't think it's quite yet. Regardless, I digress. This is an important game for the Celtics to show people that they can beat the Thunder. They only have 3 more tests, 4 if you count the Kings, but they only have 3 more tests: the Knicks, the Bucks, and the Thunder to close out the regular season. The rest are garbage teams that are looking for ping pong balls. So this would be a great statement win for the Celtics to make. Hopefully they can win it. I think they will. I think it's going to be narrow. Single digits wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't bet on this game because it could go either way. Also, depending on who's playing, Jaylen Brown did say he's dealing with some hand discomfort. He's going to get that checked out when he comes back to Boston. Could result in him sitting out a few games. Fingers crossed it's nothing serious. But I will take the Celtics narrowly, regardless of who plays. It's going to be in the Garden, so the fans are going to be there. The best 6 man in the NBA, as they say. But I would take the Celtics in a narrow victory over the Thunder. And against Charlotte, that should be smooth sailing, 20-30, or maybe even above that for the Celtics. Let's keep on rolling here. Getting to the Bruins. Great win against the Capitals last night. Caps were the hottest team coming in. They have won more games recently. They're obviously fighting for that postseason spot, which the Bruins have already clinched. Nevertheless, the Bruins are fighting for that 1 seed still. So there's still some urgency there that you wouldn't see with the Celtics because the Celtics already had that locked in. What I liked about this game from the Bruins is that they were playing from ahead, not from behind, that we've seen a lot from this season. They were never trailing throughout the whole game. So they started off, Hampus Lindholm found the back of the net in the first period. Bruins got to first intermission with a 1-0 lead. Then second period came around, the Capitals equalized, but then the Bruins were able to, it was Beecher actually, who was able to, again, have a response pretty quickly after the Capitals scored. And then it was 2-2 at the end of the second period. The Caps were able to equalize yet again, and then no one could score for the rest of the game in the third period and overtime. Luckily, they were able to win the shootout. It was very tight, went to 4 rounds, couldn't decide it in just 3 after Ovechkin Pastrnak made it and Ovechkin missed it, I believe, or maybe Pasta missed it as well. Regardless, I know Ovechkin missed it to win it. And then it went to, Ovechkin was in the 4th round. That's what it was. Ovechkin was in the 4th round, missed it, Bruins won it. So that was a good result, obviously, for the team. My concern here is that the top guys aren't really in form, right? You're getting goals from Lindholm, from Beecher. Brazeau has been really hot recently. Danton Heinen. But I would really love to see, your big dogs, Pastrnak, Marchand, DeBrusk, really start to show up, and I feel like they haven't. The defense looked a lot better last night, and I feel like it has looked better recently. They were able to kill off an overtime power play, which is obviously very tough to do. I think it was DeBrusk who got penalized for a high stick, and then they were able to kill that power play, luckily. So that's good. But yeah, I would love to see some more production from those top guys instead of, the bottom guys, because I think come playoff time, you need those top guys to be the ones who deliver and not the bottom guys. You'll take production from whoever you can get, but I'd love to see Pastrnak kind of heat up as they head into this final stretch here. Next up, they have Nashville on Tuesday. It's the only game before I record next on Thursday. They're playing the Predators. Predators still haven't clinched a spot yet in the West, but I anticipate that they will. They're a solid team. They ripped off a 6-game winning streak, but then they lost the last 2, so they'll be hungry. Like I said, the Bruins are also hungry because they want to clinch up the 1 seed or a higher seed if possible. But I'll be honest, I don't think the Bruins win this one. I think the Nashville Predators are going to want it more. They're a really tough matchup for the Bruins, so I will take a narrow victory from the Predators in this one. They need that postseason spot where the Bruins already have it locked up. Let's keep rolling. Red Sox, opening day victory, as I predicted. I don't know why. I felt very confident heading into that opening night. They were able to win it. Rafi looked great, ripped off a 2-run homer. Tyler O'Neill set the MLB record for most consecutive home runs on an opening day, which was 5. He scored on 5 consecutive opening days. Loved what I saw from them. The hitting was great. Bayo looked really good. So the team was just firing on all cylinders. The defense was good. It was a 6-4 final score, so they did give up 4 runs, but that didn't really concern me. The Red Sox had the lead throughout the entire game, so this was good. And then the next 2 days were not so good. Rafi came down with a sore shoulder in pregame warmups before Friday's match, so he was unavailable. He was a scratch on Friday night and last night, and the offense struggled. You could see how important Rafi is to this team. They couldn't get anything going. Friday, it was a 1-0 defeat, which just pisses me off so much because Nick Pivetta was great. He had 10 strikeouts. He had a great game, and the offense just didn't do him any favors. They couldn't get anything going, and that one was a bummer. Nothing really to write home about there. Last night was a different story. The offense couldn't really get anything going until Ceddanne Rafaela was able to find the base. He is so good, by the way. Ceddanne Rafaela looks great this season, both on defense and offense. He made a great diving catch. He's really settling into that center field role well. I anticipate him really locking down that position for the rest of the season, barring any injuries, of course. So he looked really good. He's so fast. He's so dynamic on offense. He needs to work on his eye a little bit. He still is swinging for some of those low balls that he shouldn't really be going for. But I think he's got really, really, really high potential to be a real contributor on this team, to be a great player down the line. Story and Casas haven't looked great. Couldn't really get anything going these last 2 nights. Now, then again, you're going against a really good pitching staff over in Seattle. They have a really good rotation there. So, you have to take that with a grain of salt. But last night, it was tied 1-1 heading into extra innings. And the Sox did great at the top of the inning. They scored 2 RBIs from Pablo Reyes and Masataka Yoshida to put them up 3-1. And you're thinking, okay, they should be able to win this. And out comes Joely Rodriguez on the mound, and everyone on Red Sox Twitter is going crazy because why is he the closer right now? Kenley Jansen, I guess, was having a bad back. He wasn't able to pitch. So they put on Joely Rodriguez, and lo and behold, the Red Sox, it was just a disaster. His pitches were awful. The Mariners tied it up at 3 apiece. They pulled him and put in, I don't even remember who they put in next, but it was too late. They had a runner on third, 1 out, so that was wraps. And you had Julio Rodriguez on up to bat, so not good there. Red Sox ultimately lost that one, so they're now 1-2 on the season and in the series. I did predict before opening night that they would tie this one 2-2. They obviously have a chance to do that. Right now, it's actually 4:11 as I'm recording this, so I'm going to wrap up here in just a few minutes and go watch that game. Kick back for Easter. You can see I'm in my Easter attire here, in a nice button down, not like the usual hoodies and hats that I wear during this podcast. You may be wondering why are you doing a podcast on Easter, but you didn't do it on St. Patrick's Day? And because I just felt like it. And also, I have this great interview coming up in just about 30 seconds or so that you'll be able to listen to, and I want to get that out as soon as possible. Anyway, Red Sox next have a series against the Oakland Athletics, who are 0-3 and are miserably bad. So this is a great opportunity for the Red Sox to hopefully sweep. If they swept, I'd be over the moon. I think 2-1 is more realistic. It's a 3-game series, so we'll see how that goes. It's in Oakland. They're going to close out this West Coast stretch against the Angels, so I'll talk about that one as that gets closer. But the Sox have a really good possibility here to do some damage and hopefully come back to Fenway with a winning record. How great would that be? Fingers crossed it'll happen. Fingers crossed Rafi. I think he's back right now from what I understand, from what I was reading. So I think he'll be back. The pitching has looked good. Like, the pitching has been good, and that's been everyone's key concern is the pitching. The starters have looked great so far. Hopefully they can keep up that momentum, and we'll see what happens. But I will take the Red Sox to win both of those upcoming series. And yeah, so now without further ado, let's get right into this interview with Tony Massarotti. All right, welcome back. I'm thrilled to be joined today by a local legend in the Boston sports media world. You know him from Felger and Mazz, the hit Boston radio sports show. It's Tony Massarotti. Mazz, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, we're tossing around the word legend like loose change now, huh?
I don't know, man.
But thank you.
I think you've reached that status. You and Felger. I think you guys are really up there. So great career you've had. Yeah, of course. Let's start off. Let's get right into it. Red Sox big opening night win last night. Did you stay up to watch it?
I did. I stayed up for most of it, and then I watched the rest this morning. And I'll have you know that when I do this, I make sure that I don't look and see what the score was, because I want to experience the game as I would as if it were live. So yeah. I got up early. I usually, not to like get into needless details. I'm an early riser. I get up 5:30, 6 o'clock, sometimes earlier than that. But 6 o'clock, 6:30, I was on my sofa this morning and I watched the last couple of innings. So I'm older now, Jackson. I can't make it past a certain hour. So yes, the answer is I did watch it. That's a long answer.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about the season as a whole. The first big question, I mean, this is a great result to have on your opening night. Do you think the Red Sox have a chance of making the playoffs this year?
So, again, I focus on the semantics. So do they have a chance? Of course. Yes. Everybody has
True.
A chance. Right?
Will they?
Yeah. And I know what you mean. If I had to guess right now, will they make the playoffs? My answer is no. And I think we all feel that way. Now, does that mean they lack the talent potentially? Like, do they have zero, a 1% chance? No, I'd put it at higher than that. I've seen some of the metrics that put them at, 15%, 20%, somewhere in that area. What I would tell you is that if, to me, the big question is starting pitching like everybody else. And if Brian Bayo and one of the two from Garrett Whitlock or Tanner Houck, if those two out of those three can have what we would call breakthrough seasons or make some sort of jump that we have not foreseen or seen yet, then yeah, sure, absolutely. And to me, those guys are the keys to the team. Those three guys. Offensively, they'll be okay. Defensively, they're better. Clearly, I think after last night, I don't know if they're elite, but they're better. And they looked to me like a major league team last night. Now, in the American League East, that gets you 4th or 5th place, and that's not going to get you into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, definitely those three guys. Nick Pivetta, are you done with him?
I just think Pivetta is what he is at this stage. I know he pitched well at the end of last season. I think that generally speaking, we know, to me, he's an end of the rotation guy. I would put him at like a number 4 starter. If he were the 5th guy on a championship caliber team, you'd love it. Because he's durable. He can go out there and give you 6 innings. There's certainly value to Pivetta. I'm not telling you he's a 0. But I don't look at him as the number 2 starter on this team. And again, look, if he surprises us, great. I mean, he's sort of in the peak of his career right now. So some crazy things can happen. I never would have thought Rick Porcello would win a Cy Young Award, and he did. So, it can go lots of ways, but I think they have a bunch of middle rotation guys, end of rotation guys, which to me feels like an 80-win team.
Fair enough. I think that, yeah, the pitching is definitely a concern, but the hitting, I think this year has a lot of potential. Rafael Devers, obviously, started off the season with a home run last night. Besides Devers, because we know he's going to be great, who's the guy that you think makes a really big leap offensively this year?
Well, I don't know if you count Casas in that group, whether you think he made it at the end of last year, but I think he's the one that everybody is looking at and saying, okay, he looks ready to be a cornerstone. He looks like a big leaguer out of the gate. And I think we've already seen the worst of Tristan Casas at the beginning of last year. We may never see him play that poorly again. So he's an easy one. A lot of people are saying Trevor Story had a good spring. And I don't know if you'd call it a breakout year, but his 2 years in Boston have been very underwhelming and frankly underachieving. I'm not a huge Story guy. I think he strikes out too much. He's a pretty good player. He's not a great player. And if he's your 3, 4, or 5 hitter, I don't think you're a championship team. Now, I shouldn't say that. 5, maybe. But to me, he's really more of a number 2 type of hitter, top of the order, or I would say 6 or 7 guys somewhere in that area. You have him doing that on your team, I think you're loaded.
What about Tyler O'Neill? That's a pretty solid addition, I think. Obviously, ripped the homer last night. You think he has any potential to have a huge impact on this team?
So again, the ceiling is high, had 34 homers a few years back, but if you look at his career, it's the only year really where he came close to doing that. And I will say this, that I think the general scouting reports on him are fair. He looks like he tracks the ball well off the bat. He moves, he's smooth in the outfield. He certainly inspires confidence when he gets under a ball or tracks a ball, you feel like he's in command of it. So that's good. He does look like he runs reasonably well. I could do without a couple of what's the right word? The antics. And he made a throw to the plate last night where he, left his feet. And to me, it's sort of like, what are you leaving your feet for in a throw? Like there were guys who do that. I don't get it. But he's very much in the Hunter Renfroe, Adam Duvall kind of mold. And in right field at Fenway Park, he's going to need to cover some ground. So, he looks like a pretty decent player, not a superstar. And I think they have more of those guys now. One of the words they're throwing around, Jackson, is athletic, that they're more athletic. And I think you can see that. O'Neill moves well. Ceddanne Rafaela moves well. Duran is moving better in the outfield and tracking the ball better than he did by miles 2 years ago. And I think left field is a good fit for him. And then, Story moves well. The one spot that was troubling or worrisome defensively last night was second base. Emmanuel Valdez looked very, very shaky to me, which is consistent with who he is. But we'll see what it looks like when Vaughn Grissom gets in there later in the month.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Vaughn Grissom has. Obviously a very touted prospect, but all right, I think so. We're feeling cautiously optimistic about the Red Sox. That's sure. That's my takeaway. Let's move to a team that I think a lot of people are less cautiously optimistic about, which is the New England Patriots. Now it's not a secret that you weren't entirely happy with the free agency this year, correct?
Correct. That is absolutely right. That's a nice way of putting it.
Yes. What would you have changed? Because to me, it was a pretty weak receiver class, and I don't think Calvin Ridley's a guy you want to spend $100 million on. So what would you have done differently, not just at receiver, but across the board?
Well, so I also don't eliminate defense from the equation. Okay. So everybody's focused on the offense, and don't get me wrong, you should be, because their offense last year sucked, frankly. But I would tell you that there were some guys to be had on defense. They could use a pass rusher, and they're not going to draft, I don't think, defense in the early rounds of this draft. So I know they re-signed Uche, but Judon's coming off a major injury. Uche had a really, frankly, bad year last year. So I think they could have used some sort of influx of talent on defense as well. Brian Burns went to the Giants for a low price. And I'm back on the offensive side of the ball. I thought they could have done a hell of a lot more quarterback. The Justin Fields went for nothing. The cost for players was surprisingly low in many cases, particularly at areas of need for the Patriots. And so I thought they could have done more. And frankly, I thought they should have extended a little farther for Ridley than they did. And I agree with you. He's not a great player. He's a good player, but a great receiver now costs more than $30 million a year. They were offering him 22, 23. I think that's in the ballpark now. I think that's sort of where it is. And, the other thing, Jackson, that I think it tells us is when you look at it, the fact that they were going to sign a receiver or tried to tells me that they want to go quarterback tackle in the first 2 rounds of the draft. So they may put the receiver off a little bit. Be interesting to see Whether or not that changes now, how they do that in the draft, we got some time to figure out before we get there. But I thought they could have been a little bit more aggressive, a lot more aggressive in some areas of need.
Do you think that's Kraft not being as willing to spend as he's saying he is? Do you think it's, nobody wants to come to New England? What do you think the factors are there?
All the above.
Yeah,
I think it's
fair.
all of it. Yeah. And again, that's sort of a broad encompassing area, but I rarely believe that things happen or decisions are made purely for one reason. I think that there's one primary reason often, or a chief reason, but there are lots of elements that factor in. So I think they drew a line on Ridley. We're not going to go above this number, although they said that Kraft said they were willing and that Ridley didn't want to come here, in which case I would say they got used, which brings us to your point of, do players not want to come here? My answer to that is yes. I think that's part of the problem. To get a guy to come here now is you're going to have to overpay. And in the case of a receiver, if I'm a receiver, the first question I'm asking is, who's your quarterback? And the Patriots don't really know, not in the long term. So, let's face it, Tennessee's in the same boat as the Patriots are, basically. They're rebuilding. They have a young quarterback who they drafted last year, but a young, unproven guy. They're picking high in the draft, and they were way more aggressive in free agency than the Patriots were. So, yeah. So it's in it, we'll see how it shakes out. But to me, you can do both. You can make shrewd moves in free agency, build your team in, get there a little quicker with some good draft picks.
Yeah, you got to account for the high income tax, and then you have to pay the cold weather tax and the we suck tax. So there's a lot of factors that you have to overpay. I really wish they would have got Tyron Smith.
The we suck tax. I like that.
Yeah. I wish they would have got Tyron Smith for sure. I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I guess injury troubles, but that's a proven guy that I think they should have went after. I understand the receiver class is poor this year in terms of free agency, but I would have loved to see him bring in somebody more than KJ Osborne. But I digress. Third overall pick in an ideal world of the three guys. I know Caleb is basically a lock at number one. So let's go between Daniels and May. Who's the guy that you want to see long-term in a Patriots uniform, if any?
So I lean, first of all, Williams is out, right? They're not going to get Williams. Although the idea of the thing we don't talk enough about is, if you really want a guy, you could trade up to number 2. Okay. So I don't think the Bears are moving, and Washington may not either, but they could explore that. I don't think they will. Honestly, if it's those two guys, Jaden Daniels or Drake May, I'm trading out. Okay. I'd rather have Penix. I think the next 4 guys are all in the same area. I really do. And I like Penix. Penix to me has shown he can throw in tight windows. Feels like he processes the game well. Like, there's a lot to like there. He's a little older, but again, that doesn't bother me. But if you're asking me of those guys, I'd probably prefer Daniels over Drake May. It's close because each has advantages, but at the end of the day, I want a playmaker at quarterback, and I think that Daniels is a playmaker.
Yeah, I'm with you. And his numbers in college are better, despite the fact that he had better weapons, but I think he took really good care of the ball. I think he has a lot of potential. What do you think about JJ McCarthy? He's obviously rose up the draft boards in recent weeks. I think he was projected to be like a second rounder, and now he's a top 10 pick. Would you like him for the Patriots?
So I do feel like he's been overhyped going into all this stuff. I thought he was pretty ordinary. I'm not even sure he's a first round talent, but after watching the pro days of all these guys, he doesn't have the sheer arm strength that some of these other guys do. Drake May's got a better arm. Caleb Williams has a better arm. Penix has a better arm, but his arm is not horrible. It's not a Mac Jones arm. He's tough. He's athletic. He's about the same size as all these guys. They're all in the 6'3" area. May's a little bigger. Let's make that clear, which is a big thing. But if you ended up with JJ McCarthy at 11 at this stage, I'm sort of fine with it. I think that I don't think they're getting a great player here no matter what. I think they might be getting a capable quarterback no matter who they pick. And so that being the reality, I'm now open to McCarthy where I wasn't before.
Fair enough. And the last guy I'll ask about is Bo Nix, Christian Gonzalez's former teammate from Oregon. How do we feel about him?
So Nix is the guy I know the least about, and in the little bit I've saw of him, I don't love him. He feels to me sort of like I would put him last of those six guys. He feels to me like your classic college quarterback in the shotgun, quick read, short pass, and rely on the athleticism, and which is what Mac Jones was. So again, I got to read up more a little bit on Nix because I have not factored him into my thinking a lot. But I don't know where his arm strength is relative to some of the other guys. And I do think there is something to be said for guys who play in big games. So I give McCarthy some points for that. But I'm just, if they end up with Nix, I mean, to me, I were a fan, I'd be really disappointed.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's the least likely option. I assume they'll stay put unless they get a otherworldly offer. I know Minnesota's interested in trading up and some other teams as well. So we'll see how it shakes out. But for now, the over-under is set at 4.5 wins. Would you take the over or the under on that?
I'm going to go over, believe it or not, because
Yeah.
I think you're going to see a more functional operation this year. I think that they were really dysfunctional. So, now does that mean 6-11? Like that's no great shakes either, right? But if they can get into that 7-10, 8-9 range, all in all, I think that'd be a half decent year, and then we'll see what the rest of it looks like. If they drop below 4.5 again, like I mean, I got to believe they're going to be better than that. And I don't know if the schedule's going to be any sort of cakewalk. The division is tough, but it is the NFL, and they were in a bunch of games last year that they could have won, and they couldn't score. So I would hope that they're better than 4 wins.
Yeah, I think they'll, it's the first year of a rebuild, so hopefully they'll break that. I think they will. Do you like the Mayo hire? Do you like Gerard Mayo as the coach going forward?
So, under other circumstances, I'd have been fine with it. But they're so inexperienced on the coaching staff and in management now that it's hard to feel good about them. So I think Mayo's going to make a ton of mistakes. Rookie coach, rookie quarterback's a bad combination. Now, it worked last year in Houston. So I'm not telling you it's impossible, but they also got a guy who is, had arguably the greatest season of a rookie quarterback in NFL history. And you got to put him in that conversation. So, it's a rarity is my point. And look, I'm really impressed by Mayo as a guy. I think he's really bright. Anyone that knows him likes him. He seems to be of high character, good people person. Like all those things are there. The thing that I'm concerned about more than anything is the experience. I'm just not sure they know what they're doing. And to follow Belichick with a guy who has no experience that's a hard pull, man. That's a tough spot to be put in.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm big on him just because I think the players actually like playing for him, which is a significant difference from Belichick from what we've heard. But all right, so we're saying over 4.5 wins, start that rebuild off strong. So 2 teams that don't need to rebuild, obviously the Celtics and the Bruins, heading into their playoff stretches here. The Celtics had 2 pretty embarrassing losses this week to the Hawks. The Bruins beat the Panthers, lost to the Lightning. Out of these 2 teams, who do you feel more confident in winning a title this year?
Oh, the Celtics by a long shot, not even close. And we all know that they are, talent-wise, they're loaded. We can nitpick at, the bench and what have you. I think they've made a couple of sort of, shrewd pickups in terms of guys that could be 8th, 9th, or 10th men on your bench, whether it's O'Shea Brissett before the season, Spencer Tillman, Xavier Tillman, sorry. I don't know why I always say Spencer Tillman with him. In any case, Xavier Tillman, to me, there's some energy, some toughness there that I like that they added in those spots. But at the end of the day, it's about the starting 5 and how they play and whether they can keep it together. I think they could even suffer a loss there in terms of you don't want to lose Porzingis, Brown, or Tatum. But if Holiday goes down, you lose him for a couple of games, or Derek White. I think you have enough there to be able to still win the thing. So to me, it's for them from the very beginning, championship or bust. They're stacked. If they don't win it, it's a disappointment. This whole thing is built to win a championship, and it's built to convince Tatum and Brown to stay here and try to win multiples. So that's why they did it now. They want to win championships, and they want to keep this thing together.
I disagree about Derek White. I think we need Derek White. He's an incredibly valuable player, and I think that they're 3-3 without him. And if he went down, it would be trouble for sure. Out of all the teams, East or West, who do you think is the biggest roadblock to the Celtics for Banner 18?
To me, it's Denver. I think it's Denver. I think that the 2 games with the Nuggets told you plenty. Denver controlled the pace of those games. And that's what Jokic allows you to do. They get to play their game. You don't get to play yours. And the Celtics shot very poorly from 3 in those 2 games. I think it was about 30.5%, if I remember right. To me, I'm a big believer, Jackson, in pace and tempo. Like, who is setting the tempo, pace, and style of the game? Someone is imposing their will on the game more than the other guy. And that means playing the way they want to play versus the way you want to play. Denver is tremendous at that. Tremendous because of Jokic. He just is really able to slow the game down to his pace and then pick you apart mentally. And defensively, they have, aggressive athletic wings who can get out on Tatum and Brown and get out on the 3-point line. And they can also sort of bull their way to the basket and offensive rebound and, cut. So I just think they're a handful. So do I think the Celtics are more talented? Yes. They're going to have to fight harder to beat Denver than they've ever fought before. If you're asking me to pick right now, I'd pick the Nuggets to win the championship.
Fair enough. There's no answer for Jokic, obviously, but I don't think any team has an answer for Jokic. In the East, is it still the Bucks you think is the biggest roadblock? Or they've kind of struggled recently. So who is it in the East that you're the most afraid of?
So I'm not overly scared of Milwaukee. I think that the Celtics are a really tough matchup for Milwaukee. The team in the East that would still scare me, believe it or not, is Miami.
First round, maybe.
And I say Miami only because I think that Miami will play a physical team style that, again, will dictate the pace and style of the game. And I think that that's where they really give the Celtics fits, is that, they're well coached, they play together. Now, look, does that mean I think Miami's going to beat the Celtics? My answer is no, I don't. I think I like the Celtics to come out of the East. I'm just not sure there's anybody in the East that can really beat them. But what I would focus on is the teams that play physically, that can defend, and, because the Celtics, frankly, don't like to play physically. Frankly, I think they're a little soft. So Miami will be physical. The Knicks will be physical. I think Cleveland, to a certain extent, would be physical with the Celtics. Another team from the West I'd keep an eye on would be Minnesota. Minnesota gave the Celtics some difficulty, especially out there. Now, again, I'm not saying any of those teams would beat them other than Denver, but I think that they would make the Celtics work for it. And it could go 6 or even 7. I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they don't get them first round. Hopefully they end up with the 7th seed, Miami. But even then, the Celtics will probably have to play Philly, which is a whole nother. We don't know how Embiid's going to be performing, and that could be a disaster. So we'll see how it shakes out. Now, the Bruins have had a really up and down season. What does it take for them to get over the hump with this playoff run, make some things happen, get some momentum, and make it to the Stanley Cup Finals?
So I think they're going to have to overachieve. And what I'm concerned most about with them is the physicality of the playoffs. And in that way, I don't want to say I put sort of them and the Celtics in the same boat when it comes to that. But I think they're both vulnerable to really physical play, particularly in the Celtics would be more in the Celtics offensive end, and the Bruins would be in their defensive zone. I just think that, that game with Florida the other night, and to their credit, the Bruins won it. I thought it was one of the more encouraging developments of the week. But Florida just pounds the net. They go in there, they forecheck like crazy. They throw pucks at the net. They attack that area in front of the net. They push you out of the way. It just takes a lot to keep them out of there. And, goaltending's a part of that. But I think the Bruins aren't big enough and tough enough on the back end to really handle teams like that in the postseason when things break down. And That has to change. It's been the same thing now for a few years. Teams forecheck the crap out of them. They hit McAvoy, and the Bruins eventually break. So that's sort of what I say. But I am eager to hear your thoughts. Like, for example, your point about Derek White's a good one. Derek White is a real glue guy for them, and they miss him when he's not on the floor. There's no question. But back to the Bruins. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that it's been a sort of lack of, like, these guys just look tired at the end of games. It seems lethargic, and that's why they keep going to overtime and blowing leads and, not able to dig out of a hole. So I think that the management of the lines has to be a little bit better in terms of giving some of those deeper guys. Like, we've seen guys like Danton Heinen really shine in recent weeks. It hasn't been your guys at the top. So I think trust those guys more and distribute the lines better. That's a fix that I would make, because it seems like they're running out of gas at the end of the game. But for me, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it. It just hasn't been that convincing at times during the regular season that they would be able to do it. I think getting the number 1 seed would be huge for them if they can close out. They have a difficult schedule for the rest of the way. So hopefully they can, earn some of those big time wins against those opponents that they're going to be playing. I really want them to beat the Rangers, because that they have a potential to see the Rangers later on. But again, it's like on paper, they should be able to do it. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do it. They just have to prove that they can win in the playoffs under Jim Montgomery. So I don't know. We'll see.
Do you have a favorite team, Jackson?
Out of all 4 of them?
Yeah.
It's the Celtics, without a doubt.
Okay.
But I'm a basketball fan at heart, and then probably the Patriots. But I love all of them. So
just quickly, your point on the Bruins.
Yeah.
If them in the playoffs, we're going to have to see another gear, right? Which is really what it comes down to. And in the Florida game, I thought we saw, a glimpse of it, in that they looked like they dug in and fought more. They treated it like a playoff game. And so there was a little bit more tenacity there than I think we've seen from them. And so, look, last year they got to the playoffs and they already played their best hockey, right? So we didn't see another gear. It is possible that this year they reserved a little more, and we'll see more of another gear in the playoffs. If that's the case, then look, they went around, you get a little momentum. Who the hell knows, right? But I'd rather play Toronto if I were them in the first round. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that thought.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's hopefully the inverse doesn't happen to the Celtics, where they're out of gas after the regular season. A lot of people have brought up that comparison. Like, the Bruins did so well in the regular season, and look what happened. But hopefully both those teams can make a deep run, make us proud. Mazz, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Jackson, listen, thanks a lot.
All right, that'll do it for today. I already talked about all 3 major sports, nothing really new with the Patriots or the Revolution, so just those 3 sports where things were actually happening. Happy Easter to those of you who celebrate, and if you're watching this after Sunday, happy April. Springtime is coming. Luckily, we're almost at that warm weather. Baseball season really just kicks off that sort of anticipation for the spring and the summertime. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Tolliver. Thanks so much for tuning in to Titletown Talk. I will see you on Thursday.